In 1937, a day laborer in Youngstown, Ohio, walked into a union hall where he owed money to 4 men in the room. He left an hour later with the loan extended, a ride home, and a job lined up for his brother. He had 30 cents in his pocket and a borrowed coat on his back. What he had instead of money was a set of rules. 15 his father drilled into him on a coal porch before he was 10 years old. He never bought a round he could not cover. He never raised his voice. Men who had every reason to resent him walked out of that hall calling him a friend. He was poor his whole life and never ate a meal alone. Most of what he knew was buried with him in 1971. They moved through a room differently, not with lines from a book, not with confidence borrowed from a stage. With habits worn so deep, the men who had them never thought of themselves as charming. They thought they were being decent. Every gesture meant something. Every word was weighed before it left the mouth. A poor man could not buy his way into a room, so he learned to earn his way in. Then the world handed us a faster way, a screen, a profile, a swipe. We abandoned the rules that built a room and handed boys a way to avoid the room entirely. We called it connection. The old skill was not improved. It was forgotten. Loneliness has climbed in a straight line ever since. Number 19 on this list cost nothing and made a roomful of strangers laugh with a man instead of at him in under 10 seconds. Number 11 contradicts everything the modern world tells you about keeping a conversation alive, and it worked on men who had heard every line. And number 2, the rule fathers guarded more closely than any other, built more loyalty in working-class America than money ever could, and it was passed down in a single sentence. These 25 tricks were not about being smooth. They were about being trusted. The difference between a man a room tolerated and a man a room turned toward. No app, no profile, no coach. Just attention, presence, and respect drilled into a boy until they became the man. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 secret charm tricks lower-class fathers used to win any room long before dating apps. Number 25. The threshold pause. Before you crossed into a room, you stopped for one breath at the door and let your eyes go looking for whoever stood alone. You let your gaze cross the room once, found the host, found the man no one was talking to, then walked in. For a laborer in a borrowed coat, that breath was armor. It told the room he had chosen to be there, not slipped in to take something. In the mill towns, a father sent a boy back out the door if he came in wrong, 3 times, 4, until the pause stopped being a thing he did and became a thing he was. 3 seconds at the door was not hesitation. It was a man arriving on purpose. Number 24. The dry, steady handshake. When you took a man's hand, your eyes came with it. Not a glance, not a look past him at the door. You wiped your palm first if you had to. You met the grip, held it steady, and for those few seconds he was the only man alive to you. For someone used to being sized up and dismissed, that hand said you were in no hurry to be rid of him. A steel worker in Gary did this in 1941, and Foreman remembered him from a single shake. A grip without the eyes is just 2 hands touching. Number 23. The name spoken back. When a man told you his name, you said it back inside the first minute, once to greet him, once plain in the middle of a sentence. You did not write it down. Using it burned it in. For a man called "Hey You" and "Buddy" all day, hearing his own name in a stranger's mouth landed like respect he had not been paid in weeks. A packing house worker in Omaha did this in 1946 and never forgot a man he had met once. The trick was not the memory. It was making the name matter. Number 22. He knew the help by name. The man clearing the plates, the woman at the door, the boy parking the cars. You learned their names and you used them. You thanked them like men, not like furniture. The whole room watched how you treated the people who could do nothing for you and drew its conclusions. A janitor's son in Detroit did this in 1950 because he had been the boy parking the cars. How a man treats the powerless is the truest thing a room ever learns about him. Number 21. The round he could afford. You were generous inside your means and not a penny past them. You bought the small thing, the coffee, the single beer, the cigarette offered before it was asked. You never tried to outspend richer men because the gesture was the point, not the price. For a poor man, generosity was the one currency he could print himself. A coal miner in Logan County did this in 1939, and men trusted him for it. Generosity was never the size of the gift. It was the sight of a man giving what little he had. Number 20. The first man up. When a chair needed moving, a crate needed lifting, a car needed pushing out of the mud, you were already on your feet. You did not wait to be asked or look around to see whose job it was. For a man with no title and no money, his back was the thing he could offer that no one else thought to. A dockhand in Baltimore did this in 1948, and he was the first name called whenever good work came up. The man who moves first is remembered long after the man who watched. Number 19. The story on himself. When the room wanted a laugh, you gave them one, and you were the fool in it, never another man. You told the one about walking into the wrong house or tipping your hat to the wrong woman. You made yourself small so no one else had to be. For a man who had little, the willingness to be laughed at was its own kind of wealth. A bricklayer in Scranton did this in 1943, and a room full of strangers laughed with him inside a minute. The man who can laugh at himself has taken away every weapon another man might use on him. Number 18. The quiet entrance. You did not announce yourself. No loud hello from the doorway, no hand slapped on a back to be seen doing it. You came in low, found one or two people, and let the room discover you slowly. For a poor man in a fine room, the loud entrance was a tell. It said he needed the attention. The quiet one said he did not. A railroad man in Kansas City did this in 1952, and people swore he had been there an hour. The man who needs to be noticed at the door rarely gets remembered at the end. Here is the part nobody says out loud. A man today is more likely to reach 50 with no one to call than his grandfather was, and the number climbs every year. Not because these men are cold, not because they are unlovable. Somewhere after we put a glowing rectangle in every hand, we discarded the room and the rules that made it work. No need to learn the doorway pause when you can swipe from the couch. The poor man of 1937 had nothing but rooms. He could not buy his way out of a single hard conversation, so he learned to be good at them. We can buy our way out of all of them now, and we are lonelier than any generation that has ever lived. The app never taught a man how to stay. Number 17. He held the small thing. When a man let a worry slip, like a sick mother or a daughter's wedding he could not pay for, you held it. Weeks later, without being prompted, you asked how it had turned out. That was what stopped a man cold. It was not that you were clever, but that you had listened, when you did not have to. A foundry worker in Pittsburgh did this in 1944, keeping men's worries the way others kept receipts. To remember a man's worry was to tell him he had been heard. Number 16. He asked the quiet man. There is always one at the edge of the room saying nothing. You turned to him and asked what he thought, and then you waited. You pulled him in before the loud men ran him over. For a shy man stranded at a gathering, that question was a rope thrown across the room. A streetcar conductor in Cleveland did this in 1949, and the quiet men he drew out never forgot the one who bothered. The loudest man in the room rarely needs you. The quiet one always does. Number 15. The open hands. You did not cross your arms or jam your fists in your pockets. Your hands stayed open and easy, palms showing when you spoke. The body said what the mouth had not yet. There is nothing here to fear. For a big man in rough clothes, open hands were how he told a nervous room he meant it no harm. A blast furnace worker in Youngstown did this in 1940, and smaller men relaxed around him without knowing why. The body speaks first, and a room believes it before a single word. Number 14. The pause before answering. When a man asked you something that mattered, you did not fire back. You let it sit one beat, two, like the question deserved the wait. The pause told him you were answering him, not a question you had answered 100 times before. A school teacher's husband in Richmond did this in 1953, and men felt heard before he had said a word. Most men answer to be done with you. He answered to be with you. The pause was the difference. Number 13. He praised a man to his face. When a man did something well, fixed the thing, made the hard call, or raised a good son, you told him so, plainly, out loud, in front of others. You did not save it for the eulogy. Men go years without hearing a kind word from another man, so the one who said it became unforgettable. A union steward in Flint did this in 1955, and grown men got quiet when he did. A compliment between men was rare enough to last a lifetime. Number 12. He gave away the best seat, the warm chair, the dry side of the bench, the spot by the fire. You let someone else have it before they thought to want it. You took the cold seat by the door without a word about it. For a man who had been given little his whole life, the giving was the point. A tenant farmer in Alabama did this in 1936, on a porch where the good chair was the only luxury he owned. The man who gives up his comfort quietly teaches a room exactly what kind of man he is. Number 11. He let the silence sit. When the talk went quiet, you did not scramble to fill it. You let the pause breathe, kept your eyes easy, and waited. Everything the modern world preaches says to keep talking, never let it drop. He knew the opposite was true. A photographer's assistant in Nashville did this in 1954, and men trusted him before they could say why. The silence was not empty. It was where the trust grew. In 1950, a man met his future wife at a cousin's kitchen table on a Sunday. He met his closest friends standing in a union line. He met the man who hired him at a church supper, leaning on a door frame. He met them in rooms by accident, because rooms were where life happened. Today, the average adult swipes through hundreds of faces a week and meets fewer people in the flesh than ever before. We have more ways to connect than any generation ever dreamed of, and we use them to be alone more efficiently. The poor man of 1950 had no algorithm. He had a room, a handshake, and a set of rules. He did not get more matches. He got a life full of people who knew his name. Number 10. The clean collar. However broke you were, you walked out the door, clean, collar scrubbed, face shaved, hair combed flat. A clean collar on a poor man told the world that whatever the week had taken, it had not taken his dignity. A mill hand in Lowell did this in 1947 by a cracked basin in the dark before his shift. Money he could not always control. The soap and the razor he could. Number 9. The shined shoes. One pair of shoes and you made them catch the light, sitting up at night with a rag and a tin until they did. His shoes outshone men who earned 3 times his wage, and a room's eyes found them first. A foundry worker in Cleveland did this in 1948 because the shine was the one thing other men's judgment could not deny him. A shined shoe on a worn suit told a room, here is a man who finishes what he can reach. Number 8. He asked one real question. You did not interview a man. You asked the one question that mattered and let the answer take all the time it needed. Most men had not been asked a real question in months, so the one who asked it and meant it became the rarest thing in the room. A barber in Memphis did this in 1951 when he asked a man what he had dreamed of being at 20, and the man talked for an hour. Not the most interesting man in the room, the most interested one. Number 7. He defended the absent. When the talk turned to running down a man who had stepped out, you would not join. You changed the subject, or said one fair thing for him. A room watching him refuse to pile on learned what he did when their own backs were turned. A warehouse foreman in Toledo did this in 1953, and men learned they could leave the room and keep their good name. To tear at the absent is to tell everyone present what you do when they go. Number 6. The still body. You did not fidget. No drumming fingers, no jangling keys, no glancing at the clock. When you sat, you were still. Stillness told a room there was nowhere you would rather be, and told other men you could keep your head when theirs came loose. A judge's driver in Hartford did this in 1950, and his calm filled a room the way other men's nerves emptied one. Stillness was not stiffness. It was bearing, a respect a man paid with his whole body. In the 1990s, researchers set out to measure first impressions, certain the modern, well-coached adult would come out on top. The numbers refused to cooperate. A stranger decides whether to trust a man in a fraction of a second, and that judgment, once set, holds for months against new evidence. What tips it is the old furniture, the steady eye, the unhurried hand, the body that stops and turns to face you. Later work found that slow, genuine eye contact triggers the same chemistry that bonds a parent to a child. The poor men of 1940 never read a word of it. They had run the experiment 10,000 times, in union halls and on front porches. The rules worked, not because they were old, because they were correct. Number 5. He took the blame, shared the credit. When the work went wrong, you stepped forward alone. When it went right, you stepped back and named the other men. The men who listened to him hardest had watched him take a fall that was not his. A crew chief in Houston did this in 1955, and his men would have followed him into a fire. It cost him his pride and bought him loyal men for the rest of his life. Number 4. The deliberate exit. You did not vanish from a gathering. You found the host, said one warm and specific thing, and left while people still wished you would stay. He was the man everyone remembered as having stayed longer than he had. A pressman in Kansas City did this in 1952 and was missed before the door had shut. The first 3 seconds made the entrance. The last 3 made the memory. Number 3. He stood for something bigger. When the flag passed, when a hearse rolled by, when an old man came into the room, you stood. Hat off, eyes up. A man who would bow his head to something larger than himself was a man others trusted to keep his head about everything else. A barber in Richmond did this in 1951. He stepped out of his shop mid-cut and stood for the funeral of a stranger. To keep sitting was to say nothing was bigger than you. Number 2. He kept the small promise, the little ones, the ones no one would have held him to. Home by 6, the fence mended by Sunday, the dollar paid back on the day he said it would be. You kept them, every one, until the people around you stopped wondering whether your word would hold. To break a small promise teaches a man, slowly, that your large ones are air. To keep them builds a floor other people can stand on. A mill foreman in Gastonia did this in 1952, and in 30 years, no man who knew him ever doubted his word. More loyalty was built on this one quiet rule than on any speech ever made. Number 1. He gave you his whole attention. That is the entire rule. No method, no mirror. When you spoke, he stopped everything else and looked at you, and stayed there until you were done. Not at his watch, not over your shoulder at the door. At you. A man who had spent his life being half-heard would straighten up and choose his words with more care. A woman who had not been truly looked at in years would feel it land like warmth. This was the rule beneath all the others. The handshake, the name, the still body, the kept word. Everyone was only this rule wearing a different coat. Stop, look, stay. Do it every day for years until it stops being a thing you do and becomes muscle memory. And the muscle memory becomes the man. The whole of charm, in the end, was the willingness to make another person feel like the only one in the room, and to mean it. None of these rules required a dollar, a fine name, a diploma, or a single thing a poor man could not afford. They asked only that a man decide what he was and refuse to be anything less. The fathers who came up through the Depression and the war understood something we have spent the last 20 years trying to erase. That being liked is not the same as being trusted. That being seen on a screen is not the same as being known in a room. That a man who collects 1,000 faces has collected nothing, while a man who can sit still and give one person his whole attention has done everything. These were not the habits of charmers and phonies. They were the habits of poor, decent men who chose every day to make the people in front of them feel seen. They had no apps. They had rooms and rules and the nerve to walk in. The rules were never lost. They are still there, exactly where that generation left them. The only thing missing is the man willing to pick them back up. He could be anyone. He could be you.